Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure. Welcome to Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. This week we have a special guest, Carole Peters from United Way Next, and we'll be introducing her shortly. Also introducing my partner in crime and collaborator, Susan Sutherland. Hi,
Hello,
Susan.
Juliet.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I want to start today just by talking about something that happened to me last week that was so, I don't know, it's just such an interesting conversation. I was coaching with a VP, and she recently left her role and is writing up her resume for the first time in 14 years. She had been at the company for a really long time. And she was hesitant to use the VP role. She really felt like the VP role had been given to her in lieu of compensation at some point down the road in this 14 years, and just didn't believe in herself, didn't believe that she deserved that title. And I found that really interesting because, if you're a VP, you're a VP. You have the responsibility. You're doing the work. And I also understand how someone who can be somewhere for a really long time cannot feel the work as somebody else who has jumped around and moved from title to title. So I talked with her about it and got a little more information and found myself more in an advisory role because I had to pull it out of her. And I felt like I had to kind of prompt her a bit to get her to really see what she had been doing and what she did to own that. And I found it really interesting and kind of came up with this idea of we really need to help each other own it. You need to own your place, where you're at. If you have a title, you've been given that title for a reason. And I think a lot of people, and I have to say especially women, end up with this imposter syndrome where they don't feel that they deserve what they've worked so hard for. And I can tell you, working 14 years in one company, you've earned something there. And so I just found it really interesting. And I think a topic for coaching when we're coaching people, I think we run into that quite a bit.
I think it's a major theme, and maybe we can ask our guests to opine on this too.
I think we will.
And I zeroed in today on some themes I'm picking up with my clients, and it has a flavor of imposter syndrome, but I call it a feeling of not enoughness, that no matter what they do, it's never as shiny as they expect it to be, but that's because they're in it and they don't see what other people see. So, one of the things that I think we do as coaches, Juliet, is we hold the mirror up so that people can see how amazing they are. And the part about owning it is absolutely true, but it's hard for people to own stuff when they're doing their own assessment, right?
That's
so, right. Anyway, really, really interesting conversation and so deep, so deep.
And I think they haven't had a chance to say it out loud. I don't think people, when they're in it, tell their boss, I feel like an imposter. Like there's just not.
Well, why would you?
Exactly.
Everything is wired to keep you from saying that out loud.
Exactly.
Your whole culture is around owning, acting like you own it, even if you don't feel it.
That's right. And I have to say, by the end of the conversation, she had shifted. She had a mindset shift. So I'm interested to see what her resume looks like.
Yeah. One of the things I'll just share, and then we probably do need to get on and invite our guest into the conversation, is I've been working a lot with my clients on having an evidence bank. Ooh. And realized today that I need one for myself, right? Like when you have those moments where you're like, I suck. I don't know why I'm X, Y, or Z. It's to stop and say, okay, what are all the good things I did today? What are the amazing things I did last week? And they are tangible and they are visible. And you can use them to remind yourself and own it. So anyway, really I realized today when I hit a little rough spot, I was a rough spot from last week that I was working with my coach on. And I said to myself, yeah, I'd tell myself to build an evidence bank. I sure would. So I got myself some homework out of that call.
That's great. I love that. I love that. That's a good one.
We will be featuring some creative products on Secrets of the C-Suite, and the first of these is Hawk on Call. This is a cool innovation by a couple of entrepreneurs that we're excited to share. They had a problem with mice in their home and didn't want to use traps or poison to exterminate. They did some research and found that because hawks are predators to rodents, the sound of a hawk's call can keep mice and other pests at bay. Out of that discovery came a fantastic product called Hawk on Call. Whether in a house, apartment, or office, the Hawk on Call keeps your space rodent-free. Simply download the Hawk on Call 8-hour or 4-hour sound loop to play on your cell phone, laptop, or Bluetooth speaker. Go to hawkoncall.com to read more about it and to download.
All right, let's go into the introduction of our guest today. Carole Peters has served as Chief Executive Officer for the past 7 years through the United Way Network. And Susan and I are very familiar with the United Way Network. I was the CFO at United Way Bay Area, and Susan was a board chair there, and that's actually where we met. And Carole has become and taken on the role of CEO at United Way Next, which is the United Way Alumni Network. And for anyone listening who is from the United Way Network, please join United Way Next. Carole does a great job of leading the organization, but there is so much information, great networking. The experience of the group is just so valuable, and I really appreciate it. What United Way Next does, it provides opportunities for current and former United Way professionals to stay connected and make a difference through volunteer service, which I love that. Carole has a real passion for community, which comes across, and everybody will see that today. And she leads with her heart, and she meets people where they are. And she takes every opportunity to build relationships with people and learn about their personal journey. So with that, I'm going to introduce Carole Peters. Hi, Carole.
Hi, ladies. It is so great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of your podcast.
Well, we're really excited. We're really excited. And I'm going to start off with kind of taking you back to how you got started in leadership. And you mentioned in a prior conversation that you started with your leadership training in 4-H. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so 4-H is near and dear to my heart. I think back to when I was a little girl and I was 8 years old, and that's the age that you're allowed to get started in the 4-H club or the 4-H program. And it wasn't long after that I started serving on committees and being a part of what would have been like the board of directors at such a young age. And then I think I was around 15 years old when I actually was the president of the 4-H club, which I'm not sure back then a lot of young girls were in those types of leadership roles. So that really probably meant a lot to me at the time, but it also helped cast the future vision for other young girls in the program. And so 4-H is, through my time at the 4-H, I was in the program for the full 11 years. And during that time, I was involved in different specific projects. The one that was most dear and dear to my heart was the Dairy Goat Project, because I had dairy goats. I was also selected to be on the 4-H King and Queen Court back when they had kings and queens. Now they call that like an ambassador program. And I actually was the 1984 4-H queen, which gave me a chance at the age of 17 to go out and be a public speaker about our program across the county, across the state, and even across the region. And was selected as and this sounds really great, but it was, at the time, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I was selected to go to National 4-H Congress for my project in dairy goats. And at that time, it was all about the written project book that you keep and the record keeping and the pictures you take and the things that you do. So I also was heavily involved in public speaking through that program. And that started when I was 13. And so it just set me up for success as a young professional and a woman in leadership. And so I will be forever grateful to the many people who volunteered through 4-H in my community back in McHenry County, Illinois, and the hand that they had in setting me up for success as a young professional.
Carole,
That's
can you
amazing.
just take a quick minute for our listeners who may not be familiar with what 4-H is and describe that? And then I think we will come back to what an amazing jumping off point for your leadership experience that was.
Yeah, so 4-H stands for Head, Heart, Hands, and Health. And was designed, I think, primarily years ago as a program for children who lived in a rural community that may have animals and they want to take them to the county fair where they would show their animals like at the fair. So, we literally took our animals, we stayed with them, we slept in the barns overnight, we met all these other 4-H members we became friends with and built this great network, which ultimately becomes the network that we connected with through that entire program. So, when I was up for 4-H Queen, many people may have voted for me because I had this project and they saw me at the fair and they met me through other things, which helped me realize that accomplishment or that achievement. It didn't happen just because they saw my name and a face on a brochure or something. It was truly
Right.
the networking and the work that we did in our project areas. So just such a great program. And there's a lot of people who may be involved in 4-H today, and it looks very different with fewer rural communities where people have dairy farms and things of that nature. But, today kids may take, some type of project that's focused on aerospace technology or, book reading or writing and literature, and all the projects can be done in the home and hands-on, and it really just allows children to take something and own it and work with it and have something created from that experience.
Love that. And look, there's your theme again, Juliet, of owning it.
Exactly. Exactly. What a great foundation. I was jealous of 4-H kids when I was young because I grew up in San Francisco, and there might have been 4-H, but it certainly was not mainstream, and it was not something that we got to participate in. But my cousins who lived in a more rural area were able to be in 4-H and showed their animals, and I just thought it was cool, very cool. And what a foundation for your leadership. And you can see that you are a great public speaker, and your confidence is it's to be admired. I really love that. So tell us what happened next. So after 4-H, where'd you launch your career as an adult?
Where did you go after being a queen?
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, I'll tell you, I was reminiscing with someone about riding in the convertible in the parades, and that's how they had us, displayed, if you will, with the king.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
A king and a queen. And so, I will say from there, I was fortunate that my father was an entrepreneur, and he always encouraged myself and my siblings to own our own business, really own it, right? Take something and make it become something that would provide us with good financial opportunities. And this, stems back to the time when that was probably very common, that people, they maybe didn't go to college and they went off and just took something and made something of it. I was fortunate that I was able to go to college, and I graduated, I'll tell the year 1989. And when I graduated from college, I had a bachelor's degree in speech and theater, which now we would probably call communications, and was unsure what to do with that career. And I actually took about 90 days after I graduated to work in nonprofit for just a short amount of time. And I quickly realized that the role that I was playing was in direct service, and it didn't feel like the right fit at the moment. So I left that to go off and sell real estate. And I had a really successful real estate career for 6 years as a very young entrepreneur, which I absolutely loved every minute of that experience, and could tell you so many fun stories around how my time serving through 4-H played right into the success of that, because I had to do the work on my own, really own it, figure out how to market myself when there was no internet, no social media, and come into my own as a young woman in leadership. So that's the first career that I had out of college, and I'm proud of that time.
Why did you stop being a successful real estate agent?
Yeah, so I adventured from there to northern Wisconsin. So I was living in Illinois in the community where I had grown up. After college, I realized I didn't have enough money to, live on my own. And I came from the era that you don't rent an apartment, you buy a home. And so, if I was going to sell real estate, I had to live by that. So my parents were thankfully allowed me to stay home for a few years while I saved all the money that I made, and then was able to invest in a piece of real estate so that I could actually feel the sense of what it feels like to buy a home and go through the same experience that my clients went through. I got married. I moved. My first husband and I decided after a year of marriage, we were going to sell our home and move to northern Wisconsin. And we actually bought a bar, restaurant, and resort, which many people think about doing, but they never decide to do it. And we both had great careers, and really many people tried to stop us along the way. My parents never discouraged us because they said, if this is your dream, you need to go for it, and you need to own it and figure it out, and you will. And so we owned a bar, restaurant, and resort in northern Wisconsin, north of Eagle River, Wisconsin, which is a big, huge tourist area, for 5 years until our son was born, and we made the strategic decision to sell that, which was another very successful business. So, I was a self-employed entrepreneur for 12 years. I never knew what it was really like to have a job that was like somebody was telling me what to do. I just was my own boss and basically had to figure it out on my own.
That's a natural for the CEO roles that you've had.
Yeah, exactly. It probably explains why I've always wanted to be in the CEO role, right? Well, because I really was the CEO.
You were already, exactly. I was going to say exactly what you're saying. You were already the CEO.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. So at some point you became a part of an organization that you didn't own. How was that jump?
Yeah, so I transitioned from our bar, restaurant, resort. I transitioned into banking, and I worked in banking for 10 years. And through that time, I had several different positions, opportunities that came my way, and allowed me to really take the knowledge that I gained from every experience I had and bring it forward, which led me then, during the downturn of the economy in 2009, my job was eliminated. And I had to reinvent myself again, which was very unexpected. And at that time, I made a conscious decision to go back to school, get my MBA, and do that while I was looking for the next opportunity. And that allowed me then to have the door open, and I worked in higher education for 8 years. And it was during the time I was working in higher education that I had this sense of, I had always been in a helping career. I helped people buy their homes. I helped people enjoy their vacations when they came up north to our place in Wisconsin. I helped people in banking when they navigated their financial struggles and tried to figure out what was next for them. And then I helped students who were adult learners go back to school to get their education, really help elevate their lives, and take them to a next level. And that's when I had this moment in time when I said, I want to work in my community. I want to get back to the place that I call home, and I want to really help a larger number of people. I had been impacting about 400 students a year, and I was like, what would it look like if I was able to impact like 400,000 people, or 4 million people? I mean, I just had this there's got to be more to this than what I'm doing today. And that's how the door opened for the United Way.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So let's pivot a little bit, and maybe you can incorporate kind of your career path within the United Way. When I ask, what's your leadership style? So how do you approach leadership?
That's a great question. So I think because of my entrepreneurial experience and all the things that I've done prior to arriving at the United Way, I feel like I'm the roll up your sleeves kind of leader, and I immerse myself in the work. And I want to better understand the day-to-day of the organization and really meeting the people where they are. So whenever I've joined an organization, really no matter the role I play, whether I'm, the CEO or second in command, third in command, doesn't matter. I want to know the people who are doing the day-to-day, and I'm likely part of that team, and really understand who they are, what makes them tick, what's their strengths, what do they love about the work that they're doing, so we can leverage this team of people to really help take the organization to the next level. I'm somebody who sets incredibly high expectations for myself, And I want people to feel like they can come along in this journey and we can achieve the results together. And then we can celebrate as well.
That's fantastic.
Can you break that down, Carole? It's probably an unfair question, but you're the leader, you're a CEO or a head of, chief operating officer or something, and you're getting to know the people by seeing them what they do hands-on. What happens between the knowing who they are and how they work and what the day-to-day work is translates then into bringing them and you and the organization to a higher purpose, vision, and outcome?
No, that's a fair question, Susan. Thanks for asking it. So I think for me, what I'm fortunate, there's two gifts that I bring with me to every role that I play. I am strategic, but I'm incredibly detail oriented. And I'm not sure that everybody has those two things that work together. Many people can see the future and they can cast the vision, but they're not always sure how to put the details into place. And so I think of my team as part of the details, right? Like these are the people who do the work day to day. They understand their work, and it's beneficial for me as a leader to really cast the vision and then help people see the full picture. So I've been coined the chief dot connector, and that's intentional by one of my former colleagues who said, Carole, what I love about you is you see the big picture and you connect all the dots, and then you're able to help explain to us how we are each a dot in the big picture, and you're going to help us then come together as a whole to really have this picture unfold. And what sometimes people get caught in is they're working in a certain area and they're so focused. So, Juliet's in finance. She's so focused on the financials and thinking about that. She may not be thinking about how the marketing message and the resource development team or whoever, are working together, the sales team, are really focused on the future. And she's caught up in more of the financial budget piece of it, right? So it's helping everybody together understand what each person does, why it's important, how we work together as a whole, and how it makes this beautiful picture unfold.
Yeah.
So,
what an incredible compliment to be called a dot connector, chief dot connector. It says so much.
Yeah.
The image that actually popped into my mind went from dots to pixels, because if you really explode a picture, you get into individual pixels, but you need all those pixels to come back together to create that picture of the vision going forward. So you're not only a chief dot connector, you're a chief pixel connector. I'm giving you a new title, Carole.
I love that. Well, and I, reflecting back on my life, I never thought about this until this person, my friend Heather Arnold, who I worked at the United Way with, coined that phrase for me. And she shared that. And then I realized as a child growing up, which I would have never thought of it this way until she said it, I did not like to color. I would never open a coloring book and draw on the page and stay in the lines. My sister, though, was so good at it. And my parents, would look at her pictures and say, oh, what a beautiful picture. And they'd look at mine and be like, she doesn't color in the lines at all, right? But what I really loved was the dot to dot. And I would literally go through we didn't probably get these books very often, but I would imagine for Easter, in our Easter basket, some relative gave us a coloring book. And in there, I would go from page to page and find every dot to dot. And I would connect all the dots and be so excited that I created a picture out of the dots. And so when I realized that, I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, this is part of who I am. This isn't somebody coined the phrase and called me this. This wasn't something that developed over my lifetime. This is likely something that I was born with. And that's why I have this beautiful ability to see this big picture and then help align all the dots to create whatever the images that we're looking for as a team. So
I'd say, Carole, you have a unique skill. One of the things that Susan and I have talked a lot about, and I talk with my clients, is establishing the North Star and making sure everybody understands what that North Star is and where we're going with that. And I think that this is a huge piece of it, is having that ability to, like you said, be strategic and detail oriented. Very rare. And one of the reasons you're so successful. Susan?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to this because I'm really curious about, first of all, it was a learning experience for you to have someone call you a chief dot connector and then realize it was you all the way through your life.
Yes.
From that moment forward, how did that observation and that quote title, somebody saw you in a certain way, how did that shift the way you approached your next body of work? Was there a shift or a quantum leap forward or a different way that you walked in the room now that you knew this was a gift and a skill set that you had embedded in you?
Yeah, so I can think of two examples. So prior to that, I'll just kind of tell the story. When I worked in higher education, I worked at this university where I originally was hired to be the director of enrollment for the adult education program. And after I was there for literally 60 days, I was told that the university was going to outsource the division to a third-party company that was going to come in and help them strategically move forward with an online learning program. And I had to help the school make the final decision on which vendor. And when I made that decision, that meant I would be out of a job, right? So initially, thinking about that, I used to go into the room a lot and share a lot of information with people. I literally could see the picture, but they couldn't see it themselves. And I would give them a lot of information, and then they would become overwhelmed. And once I realized that shift of being called the chief data connector, I'm like, oh, my role is different. I need to actually help people come along in this journey, not just give them information so that they can figure it out, but to help them see the actual picture and see themselves in this. Now, fortunately, I got hired by the third-party vendor because I was still insightful enough to say, maybe if you're going to outsource, I should be the one to help connect you two together, the current organization and the organization, and everything stays together more seamlessly, which is exactly what happened. But I wouldn't have thought of that prior to this new name that I had been given. And so when I walked in my United Way experience as a CEO, what I did very intentionally was when I would go into any meeting, it didn't matter who it was with. If it was a partner agency, nonprofit that received funding, it was another key community leader. It could have been another funder in the county. It could have been a donor. It could have been a CEO at a company. When I walked into that room, I tried to know my role. And my role was to sit and listen and take in all the information. And I used to write a lot of notes. And I didn't write copious notes with all the detail. It was literally little teeny fragments of information like dots. And then I'd go back to them at the end or in the middle of the meeting as we're unfolding this conversation, help draw all those ideas back and say, this is how we can work together. But it was all of what they wanted to do, not what I wanted to do, which ultimately led them to see they could be a part of what we were doing in the way they wanted to be. And it led to a yes every single time. And it wasn't, yes, we're going to give you money, United Way, or yes, we're going to invest a bunch of dollars. It was, yes, we want to be a part of what you're doing, which ultimately created like a ripple effect. And then eventually the dollars came. Right? Because that's ultimately what we were doing, was going out into the community and inspiring people to want to invest their dollars in the United Way that helped impact the community. So that's how I saw it playing out.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for that. On that note, we're going to take a quick break so that I, Susan, can share an opportunity with you. I'm really excited to share that I'm offering a group coaching program starting this October. The Meant for More Mastermind is a 4-month virtual group coaching program for leaders and executives age 45 plus who want, well, more for themselves from their careers, their roles, their lives. A mastermind, in case you're not familiar, is a type of group coaching program which also emphasizes your connection to peers who know what it's like to be in your shoes. The Meant for More Mastermind creates a dedicated space and opportunity for you and your peers to get individualized support and coaching and to connect with each other so that you can all grow and take action and be more of who you want to be in this time in your life. Isn't it time to feel successful on your terms and to be in charge of your authentic leadership? So if you're a leader or executive who knows or suspects that you're meant for more than the role you currently have or than the way you show up in that role, this program is for you. You can read more about it at the link in the show notes or reach out to me directly for more information. Thanks for listening. Now back to our Secrets of the C-Suite episode in progress. One of the things that I think is so powerful about being a leader and being connected to other leaders, whether you're working with them or for them, is the vision that other people sometimes have for us. And what we learn by having people say, did you know that you do this so well? It's like rolling off a log. And then you think, I didn't think anything of it because it's so easy for me. Right. And anyway, that's sort of a theme that I'm exploring, not only with my clients, but also in the work that Juliet and I are doing together, is the way that the things that we learn come to us. And when we're leaders, those avenues close. People don't often reflect for us what they experience because we're leaders and they don't think we need it. But in fact, we probably need it more than others. But
well, I want to say I was listening to your introduction, and the perception of who we are as leaders and the perception that people have of us are often very different. And I wrote down a couple things that I've always been very bold. My father would have said, and he's no longer with us, but he would say there were two things he could always count on, that I would step up and speak my mind, but I did it in a way that was like professional. Even as a child, I wasn't a bad kid, but I wasn't afraid to say what I thought. And the second word I wrote down was being courageous. Mm-hmm. And as strong as I may sound today, as positive as I may be, I have my moments too, where I have, reflected on, am I really being true to myself? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Are we really doing the best work possible in whatever role that I played in the past, maybe in the current, and who knows, probably in the future, right? We all have to focus on that and realize that it is important for us to hear positive things about how we show up. So I'm just even touched to be invited to be a part of this inaugural podcast, which just says to me, like, oh, wow, Juliet saw something in me that I wouldn't have maybe seen in myself. So thank you.
Definitely.
I'm going to just keep own the floor a little further, Juliet, because this is a perfect jumping off place for me to ask my question, because you talked about being bold, you talked about being courageous and speaking what you think. And Juliet and I are both very interested. We're going to ask all of our guests this question. Can you remember or identify and share with us one of your first challenges interpersonally in the C-suite?
Well, I know there were a lot of challenges along the way. And what I will share is this. I always felt like the performance review was not done the way I expected. And so it was a challenge for me to sit and read and reflect on the things that others may have shared about me that I didn't believe were true. And so, what I would say for other leaders as they're being reviewed, right? We all go through this performance review. We have to, and this isn't on a reflection on my current situation, this was on a past situation, is bringing up specific things that others may have said, you could do better with this. And getting that feedback and figuring out, like, what do you do with that, right? Do you push back? Do you accept? Do you try to do better? And of course, most people will always try to do better. Like, wow, if you get this feedback. And so none of the feedback was significantly negative or anything like that. But clearly that's what you do in a performance review is you give feedback. So as a leader in the C-suite, learning how to accept that from whoever it is that's sharing it, which would be, in my case now, a board of directors, or when I was at the United Way, a board of directors, right? And then also keeping in mind that each of these people are volunteers and they've interacted with you in very specific ways. They may not have the full picture. They're only taking a piece of the puzzle and then they're telling you what they think, right? seldom do you have one person that works with you so closely that they really, unless you're in a for-profit organization, which I probably had many of those examples, but I think that would be one example.
I think that's a really good point, is that when you get to the top role in an organization, you don't have anyone who is above you or at the same level as you. And so their perspective of your work is very narrow and doesn't have the full picture of what you do every day. They only see you in maybe the reports that you give to the board, or in the, annual board retreat and how you prepare and show up for that, which does not reflect kind of the roll up your sleeves, get the work done that you're actually doing every day. And the thing that's most important to you, probably, the things you have to do for the board are good and valuable and keep them engaged, but it's not who you are, and it's not how you engage with the rest of the organization in your day-to-day work. And I think that's really important for board folks to hear and have that understanding, and maybe get a little bit more feedback from the people who do know you better and see you in your authentic self. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. I want to just make sure that we ask the question that we have to ask everybody about. What is the secret that you have to bring that you have to bring to this podcast about the C-suite for you?
I think for me, the secret would be is find your people, and find people that are going to be on the sidelines cheering you on, so that when you feel alone on the island, you realize you are not alone. You are just one turn away from another group of people who are there to support you in that role. So, part of the role that I play within United Way Next is helping connect CEO leaders to other CEOs. So peer-to-peer, they have somebody that they can say, this is someone who's walked in my shoes, and they get it. And having people like that, it could be an advisory board, it can be whatever you want to call it. For me, it often is other women who have worked in nonprofit leadership, and it isn't necessarily unique to United Way, but they're people that I can call on, I can text. I mean, I have women in my network today that rely on me in that way, and I rely on them in that way. And I'm so grateful for that. My best friend of 40 plus years is a woman that has done just an incredible job in her role. She's a director level. And when we have conversations, we have a lot of them around finding the people. And we just had dinner last week together, and of course had conversation around that, right? And the good news is we have each other, but you have to have more than one or two, because sometimes we get in our own way and you can sit and commiserate. And that's not what these people are there for. They're there to uplift you and encourage you and inspire you to keep going. That no matter the difficulties, no matter what you've endured along the way, it's going to be okay. You just got to get around the next bend. So I kind of envision like an island and, the evergreen trees and a pier, and I'm paddling my canoe and I'm running out of, energy because I'm just exhausted. And who am I going to see around the next bend? And whoever that is the person that I need to see. But know who they are, because then you can make that call or send that text or have that person help, inspire you and encourage you at that time.
Carole, are these relationships explicit? So your bestie of 40 years, do you not only have her as a friend of 40 years, but do you say to each other, you are my support when I hit a rough patch, and I am your support when you hit a rough patch? How explicit is that with your team?
Yeah, so that's really great. I'm glad you're asking that. Well, I would say that mine is pretty explicit, that I know those people, and some of those folks have over the years changed depending on where I'm at, what I'm doing. I would tell, for me personally, I would say it's this. Someone internal to the organization that like understands my day to day, that would be a go-to. So for me in my role today, that's probably my board chair, which may not feel like someone I can just talk to about struggles, but I feel like it should be, right? That we should be working together as a team and we're aligned for the betterment of this community that we call United Way Next. So being aligned with my board chair and having that safe space to come and say, I've had a hard day and this is what it is. And I'm not looking for someone to solve my problems, but to listen and to encourage me and guide me on what maybe is next for the best decision given the circumstance. So that would be one example. My best friend of 40 years who knows I'm a text away and vice versa. Another friend of mine that she's an entrepreneur. She's just done really incredibly well in her career. And she's recently retired, but we were roommates together when we both worked together at 4-H camp. I never mentioned that at the beginning, but interestingly enough, we both worked at 4-H camp for 2 summers, and we check in with each other every week and just, how are you doing? And the conversations we have now are different because it centers around maybe her situation and caregiving for a parent, right? But that to me is equally as important as a challenge at work or a struggle on a team. And then I would just say other leaders that have been great supervisors for me over the years, people that brought me along and showed me the way and guided me in this experience. And so, I can think of a few other women like that I've really kept close to my heart. And they're the people that are my go-to when I need a reference. When I think of the reference list, if I was going to say, I need someone to share about who I am, they would be my go-to people. And typically you wouldn't ask a friend, but former bosses for sure. So.
Right. That's really helpful because I think this question of intentionality and explicitness is, I think, really important, especially when you have a complex job and the people in your world are complex and have complex lives. How do you make it so that it's easy to do the text to the person when you're having that really rough moment? Because in that rough moment is not when you want to say, would it be okay? Do you have enough time? Like the other person needs to know that you're actually sending up a flare. Right. So anyway, thank you for sharing all of that.
To say that to each other, right? Knowing who, maybe it's 3 or 4 people that you say, when I raise my hand and I'm waving a flag, this is what it looks like. So I need to set time with you in the next few days. Not necessarily it's urgent, we need to talk today, but in the next few days. And what's good about that is it gives you a little bit of time to self-reflect. What's just happened? Why am I feeling this way versus the knee-jerk reaction? I'm going to send a scathing email to my board chair about something that happened. It's going to come across really negative and Carole's fire, or it can come across like, hey, I had this incident and I really want you to be a part of this. Help me figure out the solution or help.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to come back to is I know with United Way Next, one of the reasons you chose that role is you wanted something that was part-time. You were done with full-time work. And I think this is something you and I have talked about offline is the boundary piece. How do you create those boundaries, especially in an organization that has very few employees, a lot of volunteers, and you have specific things that you want to do with your life that aren't about United Way Next as well. So how do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm trying to be better at that. And I think that this happens for everyone at different points in their lives. And I'm not sure if it's women have a harder time with it than men, but I have not always been great at setting boundaries. I have immersed myself in the work and I've done everything I can to ensure that the future is bright because that's who I am as a person. That's the roll up your sleeves and do the work, right? But there is a point where you have to say to yourself, why are you here? What is this for? Is this still bringing you joy? Are you happy with this experience? And so, when I was hired, which is almost 2 years ago, it's August 8th is my 2-year anniversary. I remember when I applied for the position, what intrigued me most was that it was advertised as 30 hours. And yet I've probably never worked a 30-hour week ever in my life, right? Like even a part-time job in the summer, which I don't know if I ever had one of those, but I always felt like everything was full-time. what I've committed myself to is I work 4 days a week and I'm always off on Fridays. And in those 4 days, they get way more than the 30 hours and then some. And that doesn't mean in the evenings and weekends I'm not on LinkedIn and liking a post or doing something, but I try to stay really true and save that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for my family time with my grandchildren, my kids, my husband. I do also travel throughout the year to see my youngest son in Germany because he lives abroad and I want to see my granddaughters, right? So I try to protect the times that are most important to me and also just look strategically at the schedule and say, when can I unplug so that I can really enjoy my time and still do this work that is really meaningful to me and really fills me up and brings me great joy.
I love it. I'm going to ask one last question before we wrap up. And you had talked a little bit about mentoring. So I'd love to hear some advice that you would give to young people or people who are kind of deciding where they want to go with their careers and are looking to the C-suite, perhaps for the next step or a couple steps up, and what advice you give to people that you mentor.
Well, I would encourage people to really look within themselves first and understand who they are as a person. And that may look like doing especially early on in your career, a strengths finder assessment, which I wasn't turned on to that until early 40s. But once I did the assessment and I realized and read about me, not someone else, but Carole as a person, and saw what my strengths were, that's when I started to understand I was a chief dot connector, right? I was a strategic visionary. I'm naturally a learner. When I realized I was a learner, it made me understand why I love to change and do new things, because I immerse myself in the work, learn everything I can, and then I'm ready for what's next for me, right? So understanding those strengths can help you help yourself take, the next level up, but it also can help you inform your future employer or the current employer. This is what makes me tick. When I learned that I was a learner, I suddenly could say to my boss, what would be helpful for me is if you gave me a mini project to work on the side, besides my day-to-day, because I'll get my day-to-day done and be looking for what's next. So if you give me a side project that you need help on that helps elevate me in my career, then it showcases to the organization, wow, Carole can take on a second thing, initiative, whatever that is. Now, I would tell you this, just sideline, when I worked at the United Way, and I was working in those communities, I would say to these CEOs, find your top 3 best candidates for the next role and have them sign up to be the volunteers for the United Way campaign and watch them do the campaign, and that's your next leader within. And they'd say, that's brilliant. I hadn't thought of that, because if these people lead a campaign and do it really well, it's going to go, these are opportunity. And the people who were asked to do that sometimes would come to me and say, well, I didn't plan on this. I wasn't expecting to have to volunteer. And I would say, oh no, it's your opportunity. You're going to own it. You're going to do it so well. And they're going to call on you when they have the next opportunity within and say, we want to hire you because of the way you handled yourself with the campaign. Totally transform people's perspectives, and people were much more invested. So thinking about younger people, the next generation of leaders, don't look at everything that's given to you or that you're asked to do as a negative. Look at it as an opportunity. And how do you leverage your strengths to ensure you really stand out in that moment? And because I'm so creative with the strategic picture, I can see the dots. If you don't understand something that you're doing in your life, whether it's career, personal, professional, and you're struggling with understanding how this all makes sense, seek out someone like me to say, would you listen to this situation so that I can look at this from a different perspective because I'm struggling with it? And I say that because that was from the beginning. You have a perception of yourself and what should be happening, and you can't always see the forest through the trees. So you've got to really let someone else help lean into your adventure. And so call upon those people, right? That's why you have a mentorship program or a coaching program, so that you can say, hey, coach, I need some help. This is what I think. What do you see? And people will give you a very different perspective when you're seeking that out. So I think that's probably what I would share with future leaders.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful, Carole. It's so great to have you on. I really appreciate the conversation. This has been, I've learned a lot from this conversation, and I think our listeners are going to also have taken away a lot.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me to be here. I really want to just say thanks to both Juliet and Susan for your leadership and your desire to do something like this and bring people into this, the C-suite, the secrets of the C-suite. And I'll be looking forward to listening to the future podcasts as they unfold, and would certainly say we should think about how we can collaborate and work together on some future projects, right? Other women in leadership that I can introduce you to, or any leaders, right? Not just within United Way, but across the country, and how we can work together on this.
That's
super exciting.
Sounds so fun.
Yeah.
Yay!
So this has been a ton of fun. I could talk for hours, as clearly you can see.
Well, we're
all talkers.
We're all talkers. That's part of the fun of being who we are as individuals, but also the positions that we've had over the years. So thank you so much, Carole. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carole.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite with our guest, Carole Peters. Until we meet again 2 weeks hence with our next episode, thank you for listening. We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.